This is TechDays.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. I have to say this is probably the coolest room and coolest stage I've ever had. It's kind of fun that Ignite Orlando could never do anything like TechDays Sweden, so it's kind of amazing. We'll start off with a short introduction. The session is called something like Process Explorer and Process Monitor. I don't even remember what the session name was supposed to be. I just built the slide like 5 minutes ago. My name is Sami Laiho. I'm from Finland. I live in Helsinki. I tour around the world. Last year I did 208 days of traveling, 189 airport visits, and 3 hours more flight time than a British Airways pilot. So I should be allowed to fly a plane. Speak at different conferences. I teach troubleshooting and security and Windows internals. I had a good question yesterday. Someone asked me that, Sami, you're from Finland. How come is it so that you're not a Linux guy? Linux is a Finnish operating system, so we're of course very proud of it, but everyone asks me why aren't you a Linux guy? And I have to be honest with this. I have to work to make money, and I teach troubleshooting. Why the hell would I teach Linux? That's Linux troubleshooting, empty classes, no one came. I teach Windows because it just sometimes sucks, okay? There's a lot more business in Windows. I love showing this slide. I was here 2 years ago. The last time I was in TechDays Sweden. I don't know if I showed this then, because that's the year when I actually took this picture, so it might be. But anyway, I still love it because I was in Ignite like a month ago in Orlando, and Ignite, they give us speakers a PowerPoint template, and that template has one line, and it says, please fill in all your certificates. So I took all my certificates, and I started wondering, how the heck am I gonna fill this in one line? And then I came up with a great idea. So I weighed them. So I put all my certificates on a kitchen scale, and I weighed them. I got 1.2 kilos of certificates, okay? So whenever you get your next PDF certificate out of a course or something, just go out, remember to buy the thickest paper you can find, okay? The more they weigh, the better they are, all right? If you want to reach me, email, probably easiest, sami@adminice.com. I have a blog, but definitely the better thing is to follow me on Twitter, okay? So, Johan Arvidmark, I'm not sure, maybe he's not here, but at least he's in the venue. And Johan always says, if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter, okay? There is nothing else for IT pros. You have to be on Twitter, all right? That's the only place where I get any information from. That's the only place I look up if I want to learn something. Windows 10 actually now killed RSS feed functionality because blogs are so out of fashion, okay? So just be on Twitter, okay? You have to be there if you're on this, if you're going to be in IT. Currently, the most paid Microsoft, the customers that pay the most to Microsoft for an enterprise contract, they get notified in 45 minutes if they have a breach or zero-day attack or whatever. Currently, the same in Twitter for free is 7 minutes. So at least you're 38 minutes faster than your friends if you're on Twitter, okay? I do read a lot, and sometimes people ask me how can I get to the level where you are? How can I learn Windows internals as much as you know, and what should I do next? I can show you a horrible picture, which I hope will enforce the fact that you don't want my job, okay? I also put it here because there's a huge competition on evals. I was just sitting in the speaker room, and I'm quite honored. There was another speaker there, and he had written his last slide, and it says, please remember to fill the evals. I am trying to beat this certain Finnish guy. So I'm quite honored that someone uses me there as a reference. But now I'm also slightly competitive. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. I'm slightly competitive. So game on, okay? So I thought there's like nothing else I can do to get more better evals from you. So I added nudity. Hope that works, okay? But the story is actually quite horrible. I mean, this is from Cape Verde Islands. When I have my proper summer vacation in a paradise, what do you do? My ex-wife took this picture and she just like hates this picture. But anyway, because what do you do when you have your free time at the paradise? Sun is shining, you read advanced Windows debugging, okay? That's definitely... The learning point here is you don't want my career, okay? It requires sacrifices. And that's actually the last slide. I'm not going to say thank you yet, but that's all the slides we have, because today we are going demo only. We're going to talk about two products which are the most used and most downloaded products from Microsoft, Sysinternal Suite, Procmon, and Process Explorer, okay? Let's start with Process Explorer. This is going to be demo heavy. I'm going to hopefully keep this very hands-on. I teach a lot of like very theoretical tech stuff. Like I did yesterday, I did the Windows internals pre-conference. It's like talking about how threads work on a CPU core and blah, 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 blah. It's very theoretical. So I actually love this because now I can just do demos and hopefully you learn something new about Process Explorer and Process Monitor. Process Explorer is the most downloaded tool from Microsoft. To be fair, you should have two different tools, Process Explorer from Sysinternals, and then that's written by Mark Russinovich. And the problem is Mark went to work for Microsoft in 2006. So he sold his company of internals to Microsoft. And that means that now he's a Microsoft guy, which means he can't put bad stuff in Process Explorer. Okay? So he's kind of like on a leash. He can't put bad stuff there anymore. Now he has a good friend of his who wrote the Windows internals book with him called Alex Ionescu. And Alex Ionescu is more like closer to a black hat guy, or at least a gray hat. And he needs things that Process Explorer will never do. So that I won't give you the wrong picture, you honestly should also have Process Hacker, okay? Might be caused by your antivirus because it's very dangerous, but it is a very, very important tool because it can do things that Process Explorer can't. So one example of, let's not download it here, let's put it here. So do we actually have Process Hacker on this one? We might. I usually have it. So there's two tools that I don't live without. Process Hacker, that's a great example. So Process Hacker I use a lot, but only for mainly one thing, which is whenever you're troubleshooting services, for example, it's a little bit Jedi stuff, but like if you want to troubleshoot a service, your SQL is not operating correctly or whatever, you have to become the service. So you have to take the identity of the service. Now that's easy for anything running a system because we can use PSExec to just raise ourselves the system. But the good thing about this one is that you find any service that you're running or you're troubleshooting, and right-click, miscellaneous, run as this user, and then just run a command prompt, okay? So depending on what that service is, now you have the identity of that service because you're impersonating it, okay? So then you can, with this command prompt, you can now try to connect to your SQL to know whether your computer account is allowed to talk to it or not. And any troubleshooting can be done with impersonating that user. This is like the only thing Process Explorer cannot do that I use. So I want to have this here just so you know that Process Explorer can't do everything. Most of it can, okay? So mostly we'll use Process Explorer. It's the Microsoft official tool in a way. It's kind of fun that Sysinternals is the most downloaded thing at Microsoft. And Sysinternals is also the only product at Microsoft that doesn't have a product group. So when Mark Russinovich sold the company, Sysinternal Suite was taken into TechNet, but it's kind of floating inside of Microsoft. There's no product group, which means that sometimes if Process Explorer has a bug, you can get it fixed in a matter of hours. Send them a picture and they will just in a matter of a few hours, they will fix it. That's the good thing of not having a product group, because it doesn't go through that testing. On the other hand, of course, that's the bad thing as well. Meaning it could just like get a bug, and it's like totally buggy versions of sysinternals tools are totally possible because there is no testing, okay? Nowadays, that's not that different from everything else. I don't know. I love this. I love it, especially when they're recording this and it's a Microsoft event. I love talking about this. I don't know if you've seen a decrease in quality lately. I don't know if you knew this, but 2014 they fired the whole QA, quality assurance, 1,400 people, fired the whole QA. There's no need for QA because quality testing can be done by devs, and then the rest is taken care of by insiders, okay? I don't know how you feel this working out, but I'm slightly concerned. Anyway, I want to start this from a clean slate. So when I start Process Explorer, Process Monitor, I don't want to have anything that's coming from like a previous session or something. So the first thing, kind of the first learning thing is if you ever find a problem with sysinternals tools, the first thing you do is you go to the registry, go to your HKey current user software sysinternals, and just delete the key that you are trying to fix, okay? So Process Explorer and Process Monitor we're going to use today, so I'm going to delete those because I just want to start from clean slate so that it looks like as it looked like when you will start it, all right? So let's start Process Explorer. Process Explorer, first of all, can run in user context or admin. So if you want to see everything, you have to be admin, but you can run it without admin rights as well. It's kind of like, works kind of like Task Manager if you do that. If you start looking at the user interface itself, there's a lot of stuff in Process Explorer. Process Explorer shows you the process tree, which is great. So you can see what process started what. In Windows, this is actually only inventory information. I mean, like in Windows and Linux, when we're doing cross-platform management nowadays, my biggest problem are the Windows admins. Because Windows admins forget one thing about Linux, which is that in Windows, if I go and kill something here, that doesn't kill anything below it, okay? So in Windows, if you kill a process, child processes will survive. But in Linux, if you kill a process, all children die. So we got a lot of problems now where the Windows admins are like shooting Linux boxes and they don't remember that process management works different in these operating systems. So in Windows, this is actually only like inventory information. It's just nice to know who started and what, but it's just nice to know. There's no real management to it. That's why we have a kill process tree option, and it will just talk to every process in that tree, in that branch, and it will call them and tell them to kill themselves, okay? It's not they're not related in anything else but inventory means. If you start looking at what you can do here, Process Explorer can do dumps. We can create dumps for the process. Both the mini dump is the one that is sent to Microsoft when you say send error, feedback, whatever. And the other one is the full dump, which takes the full virtual memory of that process. So the other one is very small and the other one is huge, potentially. You can always set the priorities like in Task Manager. You should remember that real time in Windows is very far from real time, okay? Real time sounds like it should be very real time, but it doesn't. I'm actually going to take a slide from a tech we used yesterday. Pre-con, TechDays Sweden. Let's see this. I'll just show you a slide from here. IRQL. So Windows uses a concept called IRQ levels that are mapped to IRQ numbers based on the HAL, hardware abstraction layer, will interpret these depending on what kind of processor you have. But you have to remember that if you have real time, then real time takes you to the highest point of the lowest priority. If you set something to real time, that takes you to the very top of the passive low priority in Windows. Everything else wins. That means that if you set something to real time, but you move your mouse, that process stops, okay? That mouse will always win that because it's a driver and it's working somewhere here on a higher priority level. So you can get up to here, okay? That's why Windows is not used to manage like nuclear reactors or whatever. They, lucky, thank God. Austria, I told this joke yesterday. Austria actually has a nuclear reactor. Anyone from Austria? No? Good. Nothing against Austria. That's the best thing to have on a recorded session. Good. So they have a nuclear reactor that is actually managed by Windows. They have a nuclear reactor not used for producing energy, but for research only. So Austria doesn't use nuclear power to create electricity, but they use it for research. And that's taken care of by Windows. So next time you go to Austria, just keep this in mind, okay? But the story has luckily a happier ending. Because if you think about Spectre and Meltdown, like stuff like this, and then you combine this with the fact that you're managing a nuclear reactor, it sounds really bad. The good thing is they're using Windows. They're using a Windows version that is immune to Spectre and Meltdown, because that reactor is actually managed by Windows 3.11. So not sure if that made you feel any better or not. But anyway, there's a lot of information in Process Explorer. So one of the first things I usually do is I will start using what are known as column sets. So now well, let's see. Let's just take, for example, I use Process Explorer a lot for security-related troubleshooting. So I would, for example, in this case, I would absolutely want to know who's the verified signer, the versions, where that image is running from, whether it's protected process or not, address space, layout, randomization enabled, is it virtualized, what's the integrity level, data execution prevention, virus total, auto start location. So quite a lot of stuff I would like to know. But now the problem is that we start to get so much information here that this is only for security, but what if I want to do memory troubleshooting? Well, memory troubleshooting is a totally different concept. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use column sets. So save column set, call this security. And then we're going to go and change this a lot. So I'm just going to take off most of the stuff we just added. Maybe I'll keep the ASLR because it's memory related, but then I'll go for process memory, and I'm just going to check basically almost everything here, okay? Because when memory troubleshooting, I need all this stuff. Except maybe GDI and user, let's do that. So now we have another set of information, okay? So let's save that as another column set. We'll call this memory. I don't know why, but Process Explorer has a thing that you have to restart it for the column sets to be read from the registry. I think it's a bug, but hasn't been fixed still. So I'll just open up Process Explorer again. And now you can use these column sets with your control keys. So you have control keys for, let me show you from here. So control 1, control 2, changing which layout you want. So this is my first one. This is my security one, okay? So you can quickly use the tool and swap between different contexts of what you're doing. So just one thing I use every day with Process Explorer. Another thing about Process Explorer is sometimes trying to find things that are running in your operating system. So let's say there's like some window that appears and disappears. Just you see something appearing, disappearing. You just don't know what it is and you would like to know. Well, if you have something on the screen, there's a few things you can do. So first of all, you can use the pointer. The pointer, you can point at a process and it highlights it in Process Explorer. And if you want to do it the other way, you can right-click Notepad, choose Window, and say Bring to Front. Okay? So you can go back and forth from Process Explorer to apps and the other way. Now, if this one only appears sometimes, then the problem is that you can see that if I start new notepads, you can see they go green in the Process Explorer. So new processes are green, died processes are red. Okay? Now the problem is that this is sometimes a little bit difficult to catch because there's only 1 second that it stays on the screen. You can change those, so options, difference, highlight, duration. You can say that please stay there for 9 seconds. It's the maximum. And then if I start new notepads, then I have 9 seconds to see what was happening, okay? Well, that's not the good way of solving this. So that's something I used before Mark Rusinovich told me another trick. And that trick is the simplest thing about Process Explorer, but the most fundamental thing is pressing the space bar, okay? Because space bar pauses Process Explorer. Now, Process Explorer normally shows you values that were happening during a second, but now we paused Process Explorer, which means that now everything that happens from now on to the next time we refresh will be on the screen. That gives you two good things. One, it's easy to catch applications that died or appeared, but it also gives you the ability to use delta values for monitoring. So think about this. You have let's say you have page faults per second. Now normally it shows you 15, 16, 2, because that's the second. But now if I have this running, I can keep this here for an hour and go refresh and see that page faults were 6,700. So you can use it for monitoring. Now, don't press spacebar again. Because if you press spacebar now, it's going to unpause, and then you lose everything. So the idea here is that let's just start some notepads again. And go back here, and you don't press spacebar, you press F5, okay? Big difference. So press F5, which means it refreshes 1 frame, okay? So now everything you see on the screen is between you pressing spacebar and pressing F5, okay? Whether it's 1 hour or 2 days. Now let's just kill these, close all windows, go back here, press F5, and you can see we got a lot of red values, okay? And then when you're done, then you just press spacebar again, unpaused, all right? Super simple. Now, if you want to run Process Explorer in another user context, I mean, you're running it as an admin, but you can also run, I have to use this a lot. So you can use a run as limited user option, which allows you to start a process, and that process will be running without admin rights. I use it a lot because my company specializes in getting rid of admin rights. So I use it a lot, but I don't know if you need it for anything. If you start looking into these processes, let's take a service host. A great example, what if you have a service that's stuck? Windows' problem is Task Manager, okay? I could easily do a session about how much Task Manager sucks. That would actually be quite fun. Maybe we should do that. I'm not sure if you would come, but if you promise to come, I will try to get that into a conference. Probably not hosted by Microsoft, but actually this went so far that last year they told me at Ignite that Sami, we love your stuff. If you wouldn't win the Best Speaker Award continuously, we would not allow you closer than a mile away from the conference center, but as you do, you are going to get in, but honest, you can't say that many bad things about Task Manager. Like you just do us a favor and find out one good thing about Task Manager at least. And I found it. I showed this now this year. So there is actually a good feature in Task. I didn't even know this myself, but there is a good feature in Task Manager. I don't know if you know it, but there's actually, it's really good because if you go to performance, it allows you to go to resource monitor. That's it's absolutely the best feature of Task Manager, okay? Where's my token? Your device is having trouble recognizing you. What happened? Like, did I cut my finger or what? Shades. I gave them all out last night. Sorry for anyone who doesn't know. Yesterday I gave out shades that have the Finnish word for administrator. That's why they're yelling shades. Next time you should come to my pre-conference. Sorry. Anyway, so if you look at Task Manager, let's do it from here. So if you look at Task Manager's problem is that if you have a service that is stuck, first of all, people will always call me and say, we have a service that is consuming CPU great amounts of CPU. And I ask them, what's the binary? What's the actual binary? What's failing? And they always answer service host, SVC host. Okay? It's always the same answer. It's SVC host, because that's what Task Manager knows. Task Manager cannot, this is funny, it might sound almost like a joke, but you have to remember Task Manager can never know what's wrong. It's not Task Manager's fault. It's not that I'm saying Process Explorer is better, but conceptually Task Manager cannot know what's running because Windows doesn't run anything in processes. Windows is a multi-threaded operating system. Windows only runs threads. Threads can run code. Processes can't execute anything. And Task Manager only sees processes, which means it can never know what's wrong because it can't see what's running. Now, service host, okay? So one of these is stuck. But if you compare this amount of information, you can say like right-click and go to services, and it's going to show you what services those are. And even in this case, it's really difficult because there's 5 services. How would you know which one is causing that slowness? Process Explorer luckily has a few things to this. So if you choose any service, go to Properties, you have a Services tab here. And the Services tab shows you the actual binary because service host doesn't run anything. It's just a stupid bucket of resources, okay? So these are the actual binaries that are, almost all Windows services are DLLs. So that's the binary that's actually executing on this machine and causing something. If you go for threads, you can see that you can see which service is actually currently running, okay? So very super simple to hunt down what service is causing this, because you don't have to look at service host, but you can look at the actual service name, okay? That makes it a lot easier for troubleshooting. Now, there are a few concepts that you have to remember. So first of all, the most important thing for you, why you need Process Explorer, is to be able to look at threads, okay? So this is the most important thing there is, because now you can go and Google better, okay? So this is what I always tell people. If you go and Google explorer.exe keeps hanging, I will bet you 16 million crowns, which is like 2 euros, that the answer is here, okay? So you can't find a case where the answer wouldn't be here. If you have an Explorer hanging, the answer is here. Google's problem is never that Google doesn't find something. Google's problem is noise, okay? Because there's 541,000 websites that you have to go through, but it'll be there, okay? In Windows 10, the commonly hanging thread is called shcore.dll. That's a thread. I know we're not there yet, but the noise goes dramatically down when you talk about threads. The idea here is to talk to less people who know more about computers, okay? That makes a huge, this is the biggest difference there is when it comes to troubleshooting something in Windows, is going from a process to a thread level. If you want to know more about the threads, then you have to set a few things inside of Process Explorer. So Process Explorer will show you almost everything. One thing it can't show you is the function names that are currently being executed by that thread. And those function names you can translate with a thing called symbols. So let's set this up for symbol fetching. There's 2 things you need to set. The first one is a variable. The one here in the bottom. underscore nt underscore symbol underscore path, point it to srv, local location for caching, so that's, for example, C symbols, and then where to fetch the symbols from. If you have your own company symbol server, so if you have devs, then make them put those symbols in a share, and then you can do this like, so what you can do is you could say like C symbols star server 2 symbols star HTTP and then do the rest, okay? So that what it does is it first goes to your local symbol share, tries to find it from there. If it's not there, then it relies to Microsoft Symbol Server. When you have that set, and you go to Browser Explorer and choose Options, Configure Symbols, this one is read from the variable, but this one you have to set. It points to a default debugger in Windows, which doesn't understand symbol file downloading, so you have to change this to SDK. So you have to download SDK from Microsoft, SDK for Windows 10, and then this will work. Windows Kits 10 debuggers x64. That's where the debugger is. Open. Okay. And now things change. If you go and right-click Service Host Properties, go to Threads, you can see it says downloading symbols. Okay. Now you have these things here that are just hex values. They're the start address of that function inside of that binary. But now if I press Escape, you can see those start to change in the words. Okay. So these used to be hex values, now their name, now their text, okay? So those are translated by the symbol files. Well, what do you need this for? Well, these are documented. So you go to Microsoft's website, look up that function, and it tells you, for example, this does a DNS lookup. Okay, this was a network issue. I thought it was something totally unrelated to network. So just it allows you to investigate what's happening, what's currently running on your machine. This is only Microsoft code. So if you have Adobe, you don't have symbols for Adobe. Neither does Microsoft. So sadly, this only works for your own code and Microsoft. Nothing else. Now when you have that in place, you could find out that there's, for example, this whatever thread is consuming the CPU. One thing that is very important to remember is some basic Windows internal stuff, which means Windows runs code in threads, okay? So does Linux. They're not that different. They're running on the same CPU that can do certain stuff. So they run threads. Now when this thread is running, you have to remember one thread can only run on one CPU core, and one CPU core can only run one thread at a time, okay? Why is it important? It's important because, for example, on my machine here, if you get a stuck thread, which is then stuck, your application does not operate, okay? But this value, for example, on my machine, the CPU here, that will never be more than 12.5. That can never be more, because this is an 8-core laptop, okay? And the thread can only run on one core. And this shows the whole CPU, so that will never be more than 12.5, 1/8 of 100%, because that is on one core, which makes your server troubleshooting sometimes a little bit difficult. This server that we're running the labs on, I mean these demos on, for example, this one is a server machine that has quite a lot of CPUs. Actually 48 logical CPUs, which means that if you look at a stuck process, I mean a stuck thread inside of a process, that will never be more than 2 point something. You have to differentiate that that is totally stuck, but from an admin's perspective, it looks like 2%, like that's nothing, but that's a full core. That is stuck, okay? Now, if you want to dig deeper, you can see what is currently happening, like what is this virtual memory heartbeat process is running here, okay? A virtual machine heartbeat process, okay? If you want to know what it was doing, you can look at the stack. And those stacks are like a map of what was happening inside of the code. So you read it so that the last thing that happened is on the top. But you can go back in history. You can see what it did just before this. So we can use this as kind of like almost like a memory footprint and try to figure out what was happening. Does this tell you anything? KI swap context? Probably not. But that's again documented. Microsoft doesn't document executables. They don't document DLLs, but they document functions. You can't go to Microsoft website and find, can you please give me documentation for user32.dll? No, it doesn't exist. But you can find the functions. Okay, that's a few quick tips on how to make Browser Explorer easier to use. We'll change to another tool, which is Procmon. Used to be different tools called FileMon and Regmon, and then in 2006 they were combined to Procmon. Procmon is actually the first product that was published after Mark sold the company. So Procmon is the first one that was published under Microsoft. It is the most important tool when it comes to troubleshooting. I mean, this is so freaking funny, but I've actually been in a taxi in New York on Manhattan. I was driving in a taxi and speaking on a phone, and I was trying to help one person troubleshoot a thing. And then when I put my phone off, the taxi driver turned his head, looked at me and said, "Why didn't you use Procmon?" Okay, didn't expect that. As an old saying by David Solomon, one of the smartest guys in our industry, David Solomon says, if anything breaks in Windows, use Procmon. It is the go-to tool. But there are a few things that will make your life so much easier, and I hope these help you out a lot, because Procmon's biggest problem, again, is noise, okay? Huge amounts of stuff on the screen. We already have 410,000 events. Again, I don't think it's the problem that you don't know how to use the tool. Usually the problem is you don't understand what the tool shows. That's why I teach Windows internals, because I believe it's the only way to teach people, it's the only way to troubleshoot things is you cannot know what's wrong unless you know what's right. And I do this all the time. I'm at a customer doing a troubleshooting gig, and I'm looking through this, and I'm like, nope, no, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that, no, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that. And then my customer will be, "Sami, could you please explain why? Why not that?" And I'm always like, I actually don't even know how to teach this, because it's like you get, it's kind of like a matrix thing. You start, I just see the world different, okay? Honestly, I know what's wrong. I know what's right. That's why I'm like, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, because I know what's supposed to be there. I'm looking for out of the ordinary things. And that's why you need to learn Windows internals. How painful it is, you still have to come to my course, okay? Free advertisement time. Anyway, so let's hope we can help you out with this. So first of all, one of the biggest problems with Procmon is that it causes so much events. So it's 450,000 events now. And by default, Procmon is pushing those into your page file. Which means if you leave this now running here, especially on a VM like this, which is very low on memory, this will crash. In a matter of few hours, this computer will crash. Because the problem is that we have the data is going to the page file, and Windows by default lets you increase the size of the page file, and the size of the page file increase as long as you have some space on your C drive, and when it fills the C drive completely, we all know Windows doesn't really operate if C drive is full, okay? So then you have to reboot the box. So that's why people don't like Procmon that much, because they think it's like, Procmon is nice, but it's so heavy on memory that it cannot be used for extended periods of time. You can, okay? I'll give you an example. I had this one happening on my own machine. I was very worried because suddenly my computer, about every 2 weeks, it would change the proxy setting to 127.0.0.1, which is the loopback address. So I couldn't get online because my proxy was pointing at my own computer. This one. First of all, just because we're talking about procmon, let's actually use procmon to figure out where this setting is, okay? So we'll go back to procmon. The main things you have to know is how to operate it, okay? This one is capture, Control E. That one is clear contents, Control X, okay? This one clears everything. This one keeps it running or not. Then we have a filter. We have a font size, but we all have a pointer that we can use, and I'll show you how it operates, okay? So let's do this. I'm just going to clear everything first out, so that how I actually run this is I have this capture off, and then I'll clear everything. Now what I want to know is I want to know when a registry value is set. So let's say I want to follow only lines where operation is rec set value, okay? Rec set value. Now it only shows me when a registry key is set. Turn on the monitoring, go back here, change the setting, hit OK. OK, go back here, stop monitoring. And now we have quite a few settings set here, but if you look at this, we can see that for example, the proxy server here is set. I might make this a little bit more accurate if I would actually have remembered to do one thing. So I should have used the pointer, so I forgot that. Let's do this once more. Clear that, monitor, connections, LAN settings, proxy setting, okay. And then I'm going to stop this, and we have the setting. But we got quite a lot of noise as well. So it's not the only thing that was set during this time period. So if we want to, then what you can do is you can use the pointer and point at what you were setting, okay? And now it goes down to only those settings there, okay? So proxy server, that's nice. Now I know this. What if I'll create a filter? I'll right-click on a column and use what's known as quick filtering. So just click include. And now it will only show me when this thing is touched, all right? The pointer that I used, the problem is it uses process ID, not the process name. So actually, if I would shut down this dialog and restart it, nothing would appear because it would have a different PID. So I'm actually going to remove that one from the filter. So now please only show me when a registry key is set in this location, okay? Now I have a nice monitor. If someone touches this, we will be instantly notified, okay? Great. Now the problem, of course, is here, which means procmon by default logs everything. It only filters the view, which means I'm only interested in the next 2 weeks if someone touches that key, but I can't have this running for the next 2 weeks because it'll crash my computer overnight. Okay? So the most important thing that will help you is remember that you have to use what is called drop filtered events, okay? When you use drop filtered events, then you can see, if I turn this on, you can see no events, okay? Nothing is in the log. And then you go here, someone touches your LAN settings, okay, and we catch it. But we can keep it running for 6 months if we want. Procmon is very useful as long as you understand how the logging works, because you can keep it up for so long. I had it running for 2 weeks in the background all the time, and then one day, one drive, like here, was to blame. One drive changed my proxy setting to point at my own computer. That's very, very bad for a cloud service. So I called Stephen Rose. Stephen is Mr. Windows. I don't know if you know Stephen Rose. He used to be Mr. Windows before, before this. What's the girl's name? I don't remember. Anyway, but he used to be Mr. Windows, and he owes me a favor because this is the smartest thing ever: is to show your Facebook on a recorded session. But I'll have to show you this. So Stephen owes me a favor because Where's the picture? Here, I got him this. Think about this. Certificate of Niceness, signed by Santa Claus, stamped at the Polar Circle in Rovaniemi. Like, think about how much presents would you get if you gave this to your husband or wife. Check this out. Santa certifies I have been nice. So he owes me a favor, and I called in that favor, and I said, Stephen, I do not understand why OneDrive would change my proxy setting to 127.0.0.1. And he said, well, he doesn't understand either, but he will call the devs. And they asked it around, and I got an answer very fast. And the answer actually was that if you have Visual Studio on the same machine, that OneDrive, then they forgot in a kind of a debug switch, meaning that if OneDrive recognizes that Visual Studio is on the same machine, it would start rerouting the communication back to Visual Studio. So it was kind of a bug, a feature, but a feature that was not supposed to be in these production versions. So then they fixed it, and now we're good, okay? But I still, it's like the learning curve in this, the learning thing is that remember that Procmon can be used for like 6 months if you need. Now, one problem with Procmon, of course, is that you're usually not there where you would need to monitor. So let's think about that as a case. So maybe I have another computer, and I would like to help out my employees or help out my customers. Now, Procmon cannot remote monitor, but you can command Procmon remotely. All right? So let's combine two sysinternals tools. Let's do psexec. I'm going to use the system rights. I'm going to not wait for the execution to end, but I'm not going to add I because that would be interactive and I don't want them to see anything. I want to, they call me and I say, hi, can you please reproduce your problem? I will try to figure out what happened, okay? So we're going to run Procmon. You have to always accept the EULA because otherwise that will fail. Then I'm going to say backing file is ctemp proc customer, whatever, proccast, let's call it proccast.pml, quiet, so it won't show up anything. Let me see, psexec sd procmon, accept EULA, packing file is that one, and quiet. And then, of course, we will have to say which computer. So let's do this over the wire. So we got another machine called Student 25, which is actually a Windows 7 box here. This one. Oh, my bad. I just crashed it with the teaching blue screen analysis, so I actually crashed this with a non-maskable interrupt, so it's actually hung. So we'll have to start it. This messes up my timing. How did I forget this? So we have student 25 that's here, and then we have the other computer that we're using to connect from. So here we got let's actually log this guy on and let's try Notepad just as an example. So student 25 Procmon, that looks good. So now here, they don't know anything, they don't see anything, but if we look at Task Manager, for example, and go for processes, show processes from all users, we can see that Procmon is actually running in the background, all right? Then let's say his problem is Notepad. And he wants to change some settings, whatever. So I'm just going to click on something to make some activity, and then he will shut down Notepad, okay? Now he's reproduced the problem. What we'll do next is we will terminate this. You have to gracefully terminate this, otherwise you will corrupt the log file. So Procmon accept EULA terminate, all right? Now terminate it there, then we'll just do xcopy student 25 $temp PML, copy that to my own temp folder. Open up Procmon and reset the filter and say File, Open. And then we'll open up the file we just gathered. And now a few very good tips and tricks about Procmon. First of all, it might seem like a very simple tool, but there is this one tool called System Details. And it's actually very important because in this case, we can verify that this capture is taken from another computer, not the local one. All right? Then the most important one is process tree. You click this process tree, and that shows you what was happening on that machine while the capture was taken. So it shows you the whole process list. And now from here, we can, for example, go and see that we have Notepad, right-click, add process to include filter, and now we have just filtered to Notepad running on this machine, okay? So that's only what Notepad did. So that makes it a lot easier for you to troubleshoot. People ask me many times, Sami, if you would troubleshoot our problem, what do you need? And I say I need two things. I need a Procmon trace and I need a network trace. Now I hope you remember that since Windows 7, you have been able to capture network traces with just NetSH. You don't need to install Message Analyzer or Wireshark. This one captures, you can capture traces since Windows 7 with just a command, okay? Which means if I have a client, what I do remotely, I have a script that says like troubleshoot computer name. So I say troubleshoot student25, and it puts Procmon on there, starts a network trace. I ask the customer to reproduce the problem. I stop the trace for the network and the Procmon, and then I start analyzing. Just combine two things, network traces and Procmon. If you have those, that's very good. You could even have a Windows Performance Toolkit trace that would be even more thorough, but that's very heavy. It's harder to do remotely. So these two things you need to do, network trace, Procmon trace, and you can fix almost anything. Now, one other thing is that if you want to analyze something that happens before you log on, so a very common thing for Procmon troubleshooting would be to analyze slow logons. Why is the logon taking so long? Now, if you want to do that, first, one thing you have to remember, always use auto-logon, okay? If you analyze slow logons, I just made up a new word. Don't tweet that. I know you will, so that's why I said it. So always use, if you're troubleshooting slogons, you always use auto-logon because you want to take the human factor out, okay? Otherwise, this time I wrote my password 4 times wrong because I'm excited, and the next time only 2 times, okay? So there's too much human factor involved. So what you do is you use an auto-logon always. And then after that, what you can do is you can go to Process Explorer and you can say, Process Monitor and say enable boot logging, okay? And that will not work on this machine because I've been running Procmon. This Windows 10, there's a small bug in it, but no worries, we can do it from here as well. Luckily we have 2 computers, so let's do Procmon. If you want to verify whether Procmon is running or has been running lately, one thing that is good to remember is Windows Filter Manager, FLTMC. Okay, shows all the filter drivers that are currently loaded to the machine. And that Procmon 23 is there. It's a filter driver. It captures everything. These altitude numbers, they go so that, think of it always as like a nosedive. There's my father, who passed away some time ago, he always told me the joke that if I go to Sweden, I have to tell a joke, which was, what are the 3 biggest airports in Sweden? So I have to remember this 20 years ago. I think one of them doesn't even exist. He always said it was Arlanda, Torslanda, or Nödlanda. So Think of this like Nerdlanda. Okay, you go from altitude down. All right, just remember it's like a nosedive because I never remember in which order these work. So think of it like a nosedive. So you're going from an altitude down. So if you have anything happening in Windows, it will first go through Procmon, and then it will be going through a limited user account filter, and then we will go through a NTFS filter. You can change these altitudes in the registry. You can change these altitudes. And sometimes we have to do it because normally Procmon would not be able to analyze. Windows 10 has a lot more filters, so this might look more, it might be better if we look it up from here. So it starts there. First, almost the first thing it goes through is Procmon. But what if I'm trying to troubleshoot encryption? Procmon won't see anything, okay? So you can drop Procmon down with the registry. Just go to the registry and find this value. And you can find how you can set the altitude. So you can change the order in which they are. Anyway, what this does is it sets this Procmon driver to start as one of the earliest things in Windows. So if I boot this machine now, while it has the boot trace enabled, let's see how this looks like. Log on, normally auto log on. Back to Procmon. Actually, you can run Procmon without admin rights if you're just looking at a trace that you already gathered. So Procmon actually only requires admin rights for capturing stuff. I don't need a filter yet. I'm going to say File and Open. Why didn't it ask me for... I guess I missed the whole... Maybe I didn't click OK. Jeez. Well, actually, because this did... Normally, if you start Procmon like this, it tells you that there is a boot trace done. Would you like to capture it? Well, the good thing is I was teaching this last week, which means I have a boot file here. So I actually just saw it. But I saw the date was so long ago. But we can use that, no worries. Open that up. So that's a boot trace gathered from this same computer. Now, one thing that's amazing is that I would actually like to use this because I have so much problems with Windows 10 drivers that I would like to see the driver activity during the boot. But if you start looking through this, there is absolutely nothing to do with drivers. It doesn't show you driver load up at all. There's like no drivers loaded. You could see the time stamps and try to see if there's some big gap here so that we would know where the logon stops. So that's what I would like first do. But I would like to know what the drivers are, and I don't see this stuff. Which means that you always have to remember that by default, there's a huge filter for exclusions. So if you look at this list, you can see that Procmon by default filters a lot of things. I get this question quite often. One question is that how Process Explorer is not able to load the symbols. How can I troubleshoot? And I tell people, use Procmon to troubleshoot Process Explorer. And then they call me back and say, Procmon doesn't show anything. That's because Process Explorer is actually here. So it's filtered out by Procmon by default, all right? So the easiest thing you can do, you could go and just like remove all of this, but the easiest one is just go for filter enable advanced output, all right? Now when you show enable advanced output, you can, for example, very clearly see the load order of the drivers. And you can see Procmon is actually here very early, and then you can see which drivers are loaded and in which order. So it just, by default, it filters out the system process. Now, if you don't know what the system process is, you should come to my course. But the system process is a user mode process for kernel mode threads. So in Windows, kernel mode threads, if they need to do something in the user mode, they are like orphaned. They would, in user mode, you have to have a process. You can't live there without a process. So this system process is the house for kernel mode threads. And also drivers show up there, okay? So that makes it easier for you to see what is happening during a boot. And that's actually it. That was a very fast hour. I hope you fill the evals. There's a certain Swede I need to win. So I hope you fill the evals. Thanks, guys.
This is TechDays.